Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about astrology and negativity. And what I want to talk about is just some generalities as far as astrology and negativity. And the first thing I want to talk about, the fundamental rules that we all should follow, is it really try your best not to make derogatory remarks regarding other astrologers, YouTube astrologers, or what have you. I mean, if there's something that you vehemently disagree with, or there's something about somebody predicting death in it, or a video about predicting death, you could always voice your opinions constructively without saying things that are going to be really inflammatory and hurtful towards someone. It's like, I mean, I did a video one time about what I thought was the most unfaithful zodiac sign. It was either the most unfaithful zodiac sign or zodiac signs, or I may have done both. I honestly don't remember 100%, but the thing about it is, it's like if somebody were hypothetically to say they make a meme about somebody about this zodiac sign getting the heat for being the most unfaithful zodiac sign, when they actually may be making a subtle reference to somebody that put up a video pertaining to that, so about that subject. So the thing about it is, what we really need right now, people, and especially in a time where there's so much despondency and sadness, we need all the positive energy we can get. If we're going to take all this time out to be Captain Courageous and make unprovoked outspokens toward others when we're denigrating them or putting them down, why don't we use that courage to maybe stand up for others more? I did a video that was comparable to this one time, and somebody had stated something about, well, Edwin, don't get your feelings hurt because of some negative or derisive remarks that are made about you. Well, the thing about it is that I understand that point. I think the person was just trying to respond to that one proponent I had in that particular video. But I think the person either missed the message, what was being conveyed, or the broader picture in the video, or maybe just didn't want to respond to what the broad picture is. I think a lot of times as people, as society, we avoid certain issues, and it is tied in, and not to be overly redundant or be beating the dead horse or whatever that expression is, not literally, but saying the same thing over and over again. Sometimes I feel I need to say certain things persistently in order for it to penetrate others and for them to actually come out. Sometimes we beat the figurative dead we beat a dead horse, figuratively speaking, because because we want to make people come alive once and for all and actually acknowledge what reality is. And the reality is, people will have their unfounded courage that will come up to make derisive remarks about others. And I have some videos where I had that clickety clack noise that people refer to it as, and what it is, it was an oscillating ceiling fan that I had, and I have tried to I've made efforts to eliminate that. I have tried, in at least some videos you're going to see in the future that won't have that noise in them. I'm trying to, a number of videos I made recently don't have that noise in them anymore either. I understand where it might where it might exasperate some people or bother them or what have you, but it's certainly nothing I was doing maliciously. And again, I'd like to know, and not to keep saying the same thing over and over again. I don't want to be the perpetual CD stuck in the CD player or what have you. But again, there was a video one time that was made, which basically, what I saw is denigrating a number of astrologers, and it said something about that a bunch of us needed to be investigated by the FBI. And the thing about it is, I'm not going to hold any malice or grudges or anything toward the person that did this. But what I wanted the reason I'm bringing this up is because when I would check on it, I would not hardly see any support from anybody in terms of standing up for those particular astrologers. And the point being, if you're going to have enough courage to make those statements then I mean, to make statements towards somebody that's basically mentored you for a number of years, someone like me, that's really not out. I'm not out to hurt anybody. I'm not trying to do things to cause problems for people. But when we do these things and then you write me, and the main reason you want to write me is because you want to complain about a clickety clack noise in a video. If you have enough courage to do that, why don't you have enough courage to stand up for those same people that you're criticizing? That's the one thing that nobody ever seems to want to answer. I know I have my comments disabled, but people refuse to answer this question. Is it because they're afraid to, because they know what the truth is, and the truth hurts? If they look in the mirror, they might see what the truth is and what it's about, and maybe it's going to hurt them. And I'm not trying to sound harsh or cold or anything, but I'm just speaking what I think is the unadulterated, veritable truth. Sometimes people are just very afraid. I understand some people might not have a YouTube account, and that might prohibit them from making comments. But another thing I want to talk about, so we've gotten about just the general, a lot of the negativity in as far as the astrological community, but I would like to also talk about it in people's charts as well. Now, somebody that say has they have a preponderance of planets below the horizon in houses 1 through 6, that could be an indicator of somebody being a little bit more negative than positive. It's usually a person that could be more introspective and introverted. They might be a little bit more moody and temperamental because they may very well be more subjective as opposed to objective. Now, if they also, in addition to that, have the majority of their major astrological influences in feminine signs, that would actually accentuate that, but it could be modified if, say, they have the majority of their major astrological influences in masculine signs. That would actually help that out, and you might see a little bit of vacillation, a little bit more of a balance between optimism and pessimism, extroversion and introversion, in being subjective in contrast to objective, and those things, and being objective and subjective going kind of back and forth on that. Now, other things to look at. Remember that Saturn in a natal chart could be a very strong harbinger of fear, worry, and apprehension. And if somebody has a very afflicted Saturn, that could be another indicator of an overly negative person. I mean, if you have it like I have it conjunct my ascendant, I also have the preponderance of planetary energy below the horizon. I would say I am sadly a more negative person than a positive person. I need to be a little bit more uplifting and more positive, especially during the adversity that many of us are going through with this pandemic. But back to the negativity in astrology in terms of one's astrology chart. Now, another thing too, there's some other, I was talking about Saturn before. Saturn in the first house can be an indicator of somebody that might appear very negative on a first impression and be somewhat pessimistic on that first impression. If you have Saturn, say, if it makes an adverse aspect to your natal Neptune, that could be an indicator of somebody that might have some distorted fears or imagination. Sometimes it could manifest in paranoia because you're talking about Saturn is about fears and Neptune is what the imagination is. And I'm not saying that you isolate that one aspect and that's going to make up the person, because as I've stated in some other videos I made, that of course the person is the sum of all the proponents and components in their chart and not just one. But that can be an indicator of negative behavior. I have the South Node in my in as far as my South Node is in Virgo, and having the South Node in Virgo can manifest in a number of ways. It could be somebody that might be an incessant worrier. It could be a person that might have been overly negative or pessimistic in a prior lifetime, which could lead to something, maybe some hypochondriac tendencies this time around, or vice versa, I would say as well. Of course, going back to the aspects in a chart can play a role as well. If somebody has predominantly adverse aspects, that's really what happens is there can be a lot of negative energy and a lot of frustrations, a lot of sources of consternation and difficulty. And when you have that, it can result in somebody being somewhat negative because, I mean, take for example, like I have my Venus squares my ascendant and my natal Saturn. And finding that elusive love has been a little bit of a hardship for me. Venus making an adverse aspect to the ascendant could be an indicator of somebody that maybe doesn't think that they're overly attractive or they're worth having somebody in their life scheme as far as a significant other. Saturn adverse Venus could suggest a person that maybe doesn't deserve maybe they don't deserve love, or there's or there could be a lot of roadblocks and obstructions in trying to find that. Well, it could be maybe a lack of self-worth might be tied in to maybe not having that love in that person's life. And the reality is we have to just remember that, I mean, negative aspects in the chart can be overcome. We do have free will. There are things called progressions in our chart, and we also have transits as well that can help us. If somebody has, say, transit Jupiter making a sextile or trine to their natal Venus, or even a conjunction to it, that could be a more auspicious period for love in one's life, and somebody becoming might express a little bit more positive energy. If somebody has, now if we go to chart rulers, let's say somebody has the ruler of the sixth house in the first house, that could be an indicator of somebody being overly worried on a first impression, because you're talking about the sixth house does correspond with Virgo in astrology, and that is the sign that's really strongly associated with worry. That's the house associated with it, but it's also Virgo is the sign that corresponds with the sixth house, and it can indicate worrisome energy. So there's really not much more I want to say as far as this goes. But there's also, I mean, you could have some indirect aspects in the chart that might indirectly affect a person's behavior. I mean, let's say somebody has Saturn making an opposition or makes an adverse, let's say Saturn makes an adverse aspect to one's moon in one's natal chart. In a lot of cases, you could have parents that could be divorced or separated. Maybe the situation might be contentious with them. Maybe there's something where there's discord or strife with them. And if that's the case, sometimes that could affect a person, the way they might act toward others. So there are certain things in the chart where even if you have a lot of energy, that would indicate a lot of astrological energy that would lean more toward positive energy. Sometimes there are certain aspects that might do something, I think, where it might manifest in negative, still might manifest in some kind of negative behavior. So anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment. Until next time, people, Edwin Learnard saying stay well.